It isn't uncommon for people to have strange and expansive collections of everyday items, but for Ruth Hanna, her pursuit of collecting soda can tabs was more than a hobby. It was a lifelong mission that the 91-year-old had spent decades working on. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like and share this video with your friends. She would spend hours going through dumpsters and driving around town to find precious soda can tabs. And while everyone pointed and laughed, Hanna continued with her collection. Only when Hanna got her collection appraised did everyone finally realize what the woman had been doing. After the death of her partner, Ruth had been left untethered. And while she had always gone around collecting soda can tabs, it was after this tragic event that her hobby turned into a lifelong passion. She was 91 years old, and with all her kids grown up and moved away, Ruth would spend all her free time driving around her small town and going through dumpsters. It was a lonely time in her life, but the actual reason behind her collection helped her stay focused. At first glance, no one could have imagined that this 91-year-old was a dumpster diving expert who would spend up to 8 hours sifting through strangers' garbage to find as many cans as possible. She hoped to find cans, soup, soda, or other food that had a pop tab. No one knew why the older woman was doing this. Her husband and Ruth had managed to save a comfortable nest egg for themselves, so it wasn't financial stress motivating her. And of course, it is no surprise that everyone who spotted the 91-year-old rummaging through large and smelly trash cans and dumpsters to find cans, specifically the tabs, was left confused. With no close friends or family left to defend her, Ruth soon became a laughingstock, and her hobby only isolated her further from her community. But if only they knew the actual reason behind Ruth's collection, they would have followed in her footsteps. Her neighbors and acquaintances watched Ruth bring home hundreds of canned tabs for decades. She would visit grocery stores, public dumpsters, private trash cans, and everything else in between in search of them. This hobby, which turned out to be for a noble cause, ended up ensuring that Ruth became a complete outcast in her community. And while most people would have stopped their collection, Ruth didn't mind their judgment because she knew what she was doing and why she was doing it. While living alone helped aid in her quest for finding can tabs, it was clear to Ruth that she needed help. At 91 years old, she couldn't keep up with her old routines, and with a heavy heart, the elderly woman decided to move into a retirement home. The change felt necessary yet daunting to Ruth, but thankfully, the facility and its staff took care of her needs, and she even started making friends with the other residents. After decades of living an isolated life, Ruth finally felt like she belonged to a community. Most expected that as Ruth's social circle grew, her desire to collect soda can tabs would diminish, but nothing changed. Instead, the elderly woman would still spend hours upon hours organizing trash to find the tabs. And while at first, the facility employees didn't have any issue with her bringing in thousands of boxes full of canned tabs, and they gently tried to persuade Ruth to explain her motives or at least recycle some of them. But Ruth stayed headstrong and refused to provide an explanation as to why she is determined to collect all of these can tabs. It was clear to the facility employees that Ruth's collection had a sentimental and more significant purpose, one which the elderly woman was keeping close to her heart. The one thing that changed for the better was that Ruth wasn't isolated or ostracized at the retirement facility because of her hobby. Instead, the people around her supported her and even helped in her search for canned tabs. Many of the residents at the facility would save any tabs they found and promptly gift them to Ruth. Day in and day out, after Ruth's scheduled activities at the facility, she would sit in her room and count all the tabs she collected before neatly arranging them in boxes, jugs, and other containers. And after years upon years of hard work, Ruth finally reached her goal. She had collected 1 million tabs. When her collection was complete, the 91-year-old felt like a young child and excitedly announced her accomplishment to all her friends at the retirement facility. The staff and the residents were beyond excited for Ruth, and even though it was a weird, strange, and unexplained collection, it was clear that the collection's completion meant a lot to Ruth. Many residents tried to ask Ruth about the reason behind her collection of canned tabs, but she remained secretive. All the 91-year-old wanted was to make a specific phone call without giving any explanation. After the call, Ruth locked herself in her double room. checking that all her calculations were correct. She didn't sleep a wink all night, excited to finally reveal the real reason behind her decade-long mission of collecting canned tabs. And when the big van pulled up to the retirement facility, all the residents were buzzing with excitement. Finally, they would learn what Ruth was up to. And as they saw the van, it all started to make sense. The van had Ronald McDonald House Charity written on the side, and as residents gathered around it, it was evident that Ruth's decades-long mission was related to philanthropy. Finally, two workers left the van and headed directly toward Ruth's room. And in the span of a few minutes, they started taking out boxes upon boxes of canned tabs. While the charity workers had expected to receive a generous donation, even they were surprised at the sheer amount of canned tabs Ruth had managed to collect. With the last of her collection loaded into the van, Ruth looked like a weight had been lifted from her. She had made a promise to the charity and herself, and she was finally able to turn it into a reality. But the main question remained: why canned tabs? And after decades of never bothering to give anyone an explanation, Ruth finally decided to tell her side of the story and what had motivated her to start this journey. The Ronald McDonald House had a special place in Ruth's heart. She had grown up as an orphan and had relied heavily on charities to support her through her childhood and adolescence. So, if it weren't for organizations like the Ronald McDonald House, Ruth wouldn't have been the person she was today. So to thank them, she donated to as many philanthropic organizations as she could have. The Ronald McDonald House mainly focused on helping families with children in need, namely those with an illness. And a simple way to support the organization was to send them canned tabs which the nonprofit organization would sell to support their cause. And when Ruth heard about their simple request and the abundance of cans scattered around her town, she thought of killing two birds with one stone. She would not only be cleaning up her community, but also giving back. While on paper, canned tab might not seem like they would make a sizable dent, Ruth managed to collect $4 million through her endeavors. And this wasn't her only donation. Ruth Hanna has donated several times to the organization, so much so that they have declared a Ruth Hanna Day 12 separate times. She had also received countless thank you letters from families she had helped and officials for her devotion to the cause. When asked about the Ronald McDonald House, one of Ruth's fellow retirement home residents spoke very highly of it, saying, "They operate totally on volunteers and donations. And when you look at what Ronald McDonald House does, it makes you look beyond yourself to help somebody else." They also had kind words to say about Ruth. It is giving her something to do. They continued, "She feels like she is contributing. And an older person needs to have a purpose in life, a reason. It is important as you get older to look beyond yourself." While friends were casually helping Ruth after they saw her impact, they also started collecting pop tabs for charity. One staff member said, "I'm amazed at how these tabs have taken off." He continued, "It has gone out into the community, and I'm tickled that Ruth has gotten into this. It has given her something to do and made her feel useful. It is beyond heartwarming to see that Ruth has managed to inspire so many." Soon, Ruth was heralded as a philanthropic hero and was interviewed by many news stations. Speaking to a Milwaukee news station, Ruth explained how she managed to stay content and happy during the entire ordeal. She said, "I know it's hilarious when I went to Miller Park. Sometimes I would almost fall down into those dumpsters. But after dedicating so many years of her life to this cause, Ruth had no plans of stopping. After handing off the boxes full of pop tabs, she was back hopping into dumpsters and searching for tabs whenever she had the chance. It's not what you get, it's what you give that count." Her motivation stemmed from her past trauma, and Ruth spent all her life ensuring that no other child would go through the same situation. Then, she said, Christmas would come, and I would cry that I had nobody to celebrate with.